Hey, so a while back I said I wanted to make a sort of speed painty process video, and now I've finally gotten around to it. Not least because I'm very anxious about my voice. I've provided commentary throughout that sort of explains my process, and critique is always welcome. If you're curious, the tablet I use is a Huion Canvas 20, I hope I pronounced that right, and it's the 2019 version. I apologise if the audio is a bit sketch, all I've got is a headset mic and I can't afford a proper mic. Anyway, let's draw. I decided to draw Moxxi from Borderlands, specifically her Borderlands 3 design, just because I've been playing a lot of it recently. The sketch phase allows me to experiment with a pose I had in mind, make sure my proportions aren't wild before I begin line art. Sometimes I'll just hop straight into line art anyway, just because my lines are fairly sketchy, but I'll do a mock-up beforehand if I fancy it. Just depends, really. I know a lot of artists use thin lines for the sketching phase, but I like thick lines with pen sensitivity so I can better capture the movement and I won't lose it when I start the line art. You'll also notice I'm not actually zooming in that much. That's just because I like to know that I'm getting the proportions right and the perspectives alright before I actually start the line art. I use the same pen for line art, but this time I clean up my lines as I go along. I intentionally draw them thicker so that I kind of raise them back and have a nice contrast in line density. It just looks very cartoony and I really like that effect. The brush I'm using is just a flat noise texture, but I turn the spacing down so it kind of looks like a brush. Obviously, as I go, I just flip my canvas to make sure that I'm not messing up any of the facial features. I probably should have also done this during the sketching phase, but I forgot and I didn't, and that was very naughty of me. On a side note, what's your favourite planet in Borderlands 3? I might get some slack for this, but I really liked Eden 6. The swampy biome mixed with the old Jacobs technology and the oil rigs was a really unique setting, even if the ending was pretty terrible. I'll never forgive Gearbox for killing off Aurelia like that. She was my favourite. I'm paying special attention to her hair here, because if you look at the Borderlands character design, every single line is very thick, bold and emphasised, so I'm just trying to achieve that effect. Often what I like to do with line art is using a thin pen to just carve out certain areas and then going over it once or twice and then carving it back. This is what I mentioned earlier, just making a thick line and then colouring it back just so it looks a lot nicer and has a sort of thick cartoony effect. That leg couldn't be saved, so I had to start over. That's my one advice actually. Don't be afraid to just rub something out and start over, because you'll be amazed at how better it'll look, because you'll know what not to do. I'm doing her megaphone in blue on a separate layer, because I know I can't decide on whether I want it to be in front of her hair or behind the hair, so I figure I'll just experiment, see what happens, see what angle I like it at. Can you tell this megaphone drove me insane? I'm really bloody particular about certain areas. If they're not perfect, I won't move on from them for like 20 minutes. I was going to draw Wainwright originally, considering, in my opinion at least, he was one of the only saving graces of Borderlands 3's writing. But I had to give it to Moxxi because she's given me some good guns. I don't know, there's just something about Wainwright's accent when he goes off about his dad's death at the hands of the COV. It just gets me every single time. It's probably one of my favourite Echo recordings. One of these days, drawing hands is going to be the death of me. Finally! Took you long enough. Right, clean up. I just add a few creases, thicken up some lines, and then do that carving back method I mentioned. Just making sure the line art looks really kind of poppy before I start colouring it. I don't know. I guess you could argue I do a second sketch layer when I move on to line art. Yeah, quote unquote line art. It's just more messy sketching until I eventually end up with something I'm happy with. But, you know, I've always had the philosophy that doesn't matter how the art's done, as long as you're not tracing it, then it's alright. Of all of the Borderlands 2 characters in Borderlands 3, I think my favourite is probably Zero. Just because they didn't do any injustice by him, you know? They didn't kill him off like Maya, or indeed, you know, Lilith and Aurelia. He's just chill, he's just Zero. I mean, how can you muck up Zero, really? He's just a cool guy with a sword that talks in haiku and kills shit. It's awesome. And Brick, too. It's Brick. Come on. I'm doing her fishnets on a separate layer here because I couldn't decide whether I wanted to switch it to a soft light layer and maybe have it like coloured in that way, or just if I was going to do it in a grey colour and then lower the opacity. I just have to leave my options open because maybe something will look better and I didn't realise it would. So just experiment really. Have fun with it. That's the whole point of art. Right, on to colouring. I always think colouring's going to be my favourite part of every single piece, and then I end up dreading it because I'm really particular. You'll notice I'm always flipping over to my reference and colour picking because I'm really, really stingy about what I do with my colours. Sometimes I'll just pick a colour and I don't like it and I'll change it, but for the most part I really like to colour pick. I'm using a different brush here that's softer around the edges, just so I can achieve that kind of messy fabric effect. This is another custom brush, it's just a sort of, I don't know, a roller kind of colour, you know, like one of those big roller paint brushes, but I've had it so that it's a lot softer around the edges and also looks really good when you use it as a rubber. Like it just gives it a nice natural texture. Every now and then I'll just switch back to the line art layer because I've realised that maybe I've missed some things or, you know, whatever. So I'll just go back and clean them up. I definitely have the most layers when I'm colouring, just because I like to separate certain things out. Like you'll see I've done the stripes on her dress separate to the actual dress colouring itself, and the skin layer is actually below everything. This is just that, just in case I don't feel like the colours fit too well with each other, I can go back and change them quickly without having to colour around everything else, because it just makes a mess. I'm using that soft roller brush again to add in the highlights to the hair. This saves me having to render every single piece of highlighted hair, but it also gives it a nice kind of textured effect. The one that I'm looking for, so win-win. Throughout this entire process, I've only used around 3 brushes. One, which is that kind of chalky, sketchy brush that I use for line art. The second one was that chisely roller brush, and the third one is just a straight flat circle brush that I use for colouring in. Just keeping it simple so that I don't lose track of what I'm doing in which area. You know, I know how my brain works, and it's very, very messy up there. I really like that they gave Moxxi more of a background with Timothy in Moxxi's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot. I don't know, just seeing those two interact was really sweet. I wouldn't say it's my favourite DLC though. I'd say definitely Aurelia Hamlock in the pre-sequel. She was so much fun to play. I think I just like playing with sniper rifles. If you're interested, the elapsed time for this painting was around 2 hours and 10 minutes. Give or take. I think I was actually listening to the Valorant Champions tour on Twitch while I was painting this. That's probably why I had so much patience to finish this off. Sorry about the cut, my recording software cut out stupidly. What you missed was the fact that I added a multiply layer at 30% opacity and just used a soft blue colour to shade. Then I added a second multiply layer at a higher opacity, but just straight black, just so I could shade in around certain darker edges, like under her chin and her hair. What I'm doing right now is on an addition layer, and I'm just adding some pink highlights, because I am a sucker for highlights. It's also bisexual lighting, so yeah, there you go. Lastly, just a few finishing touches like some pink love hearts coming out of her megaphone because she loves you, and a shadow around where she's sitting to fill out the frame. And here she is, the finished piece. Thank you for sitting through this little process video with me. I know I said I'd do one a while ago, and I'm glad I finally managed to get around to doing one, because this was actually a lot of fun. I hope I've explained my process well. If you have any more questions, please just leave a comment and I'll be more than happy to just explain something I may have missed out or something you just didn't understand, because this is my first time doing something like this and I know I'll get some things wrong. So thank you again for sticking with me. Bye bye now.